Hi, I'm Taylor Duncan, and today I'm going to be demonstrating how to start or administer IV medications, and then how to also start a piggyback line as well. Before I get started, I'm just going to make sure I perform hand hygiene and apply my gloves. So with this, the first thing I would do is introduce myself to the patient, let them know what we're doing, what the provider ordered. In this case, we're going to be doing, the orders were 150 milliliters, but we're going to be using a 250 milliliter bag, so we're only going to be using part of the bag. And then we're going to start a piggyback line of 100 milliliters. Next, I would want to make sure that I do the 6 rights of patient medication administration. So I'd want to have the right patient, the right time, dose, route, medication, and documentation. And then I also would want to double check and make sure my patient isn't allergic to any medications at all before I administered anything. So I've done my hand hygiene. I'm going to go ahead and put on my gloves. The IV bags are normally in a plastic bag, but the bags were hard to open, so I did it beforehand. But I would just make sure that I put my gloves on, and then I'd be opening my IV bags. And then for an adult patient, we want to make sure that the IV bag is hanging at least 30 inches above the IV site. In this case, I only have so much space to hang my IV bags, but I would just make sure in an actual scenario with a real patient that I'd want to make sure my IV bag is at least 30 inches above. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my 250 milliliter bag. Again, we're only going to be using 150 milliliters, so I'm going to start, and I put it on my IV hook. I'm just gonna get the bag on here. It's a little hard on a hanger. And I don't want to touch the bottom ports at all to contaminate them at all. So I'm going to hang that, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get my primary IV tubing, which is this one right here. It's a little long. So parts of the tubing, so this is the spike end, and it has the cap over it, which I'll remove in a minute. This is the drip chamber, which is where the drops are going to come out and go to the tubing. This is our roller clamp, and this is how we're going to set the drops per minute. I am going to go ahead and move it into the off position right now. We have our tubing. This is the Y part of the tubing, which is where we're going to connect our piggyback line here in a minute. And then this is the end adapter, which is where we would put it into our patient's IV site. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the cap, and I am going to spike it into the IV bag. Okay. So with this patient, again, it was ordered for 150 milliliters. It's a 250 milliliter bag, but I did figure the drip rate, which is 42 drips per minute. And you can figure this out by doing the drop factor divided by the number of hours or minutes, and then times the flow rate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to set my my drip rate. So again, it's going to be 42 drips per minute. So I'm going to grab my phone. I have a timer set for a minute, and I'm just going to open up the IV line, and then I'm going to make sure I can set my my drops to 42 a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and open this before I start. Okay, and start the timer. little fast in the beginning, so I'm gonna slow it down a little bit. Okay. Okay, so I got my 42 drops per minute. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off just so it's not dripping. But again, I would set, double check, make sure my drip factor is correct. So once we have started that, we started administering the medication. The provider did order a piggyback line, and it is 100 milliliters. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my IV bag that I'm going to use for my piggyback line. And again, I would let the patient know what it is the doctor ordered, what medication is prescribed, 6 rights of medication, patient medication administration, and then again, double checking to make sure the patient doesn't have any allergies. And with the piggyback line, we want to make sure that it is higher than the initial IV line or the IV bag. In this case, I can't really set it up any higher, but I would want it significantly higher than the primary IV bag. So I'm going to go ahead and set the piggyback line right there and get out my secondary tubing. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the cap. Okay. Set this to off. Got a little kink in my tubing. Okay, and then I'm going to grab my alcohol pad. And we are going to connect it to the Y part of our primary line. And I'm just going to wipe this off with my alcohol pad. Throw that away. And then we are going to take the cap off and connect our secondary tubing to the primary line. Okay, so I have my piggyback tubing all good to go. Again, we calculate the drops per minute the same as we did the initial bag. This one I calculated is going to be 28 drops per minute. So again, we would just time it for a minute, set the IV tubing to make sure it's 28 drops. And then once that is finished, we would take the IV bag down and then we would start the primary line back up again until it was completely finished. Take care of the tubing, make sure the patient's okay, and we'd want to keep checking the IV site throughout the medication being administered just to make sure everything's okay with the IV site on the patient. We'd be able to discontinue the IV site and then document the procedure. And then I would just, again, remove my gloves and perform my hand hygiene. Throw those away and then again, just document what you just did.